Soma Talks podcast is sponsored by Elevated by the Cannabis Lady. Owner Jill Cohen is passionate about cannabis. Her dispensary caters to those with a refined taste and believe that cannabis can transform lives into an elevated experience when properly used. The plants with their healing benefits bring happiness while lowering anxiety, pain, and many other symptoms. Elevated by the Cannabis Lady offers a 5-star experience that starts with a friendly environment and highly trained bud tenders ready to guide every customer on their journey. Jill and her team are committed to a higher level of wellness. Check out the Cannabis Lady at 9 Highland Place, downtown Maplewood. Be sure to mention the Soma Talks podcast and get 20% off. That's 20% off. Righteous bucks. The Cannabis Lady. Check her out. And welcome to the Soma Talks podcast, sponsored and elevated by the Cannabis Lady, and Coda Kitchen, and Maplewood Karate. I'm Lee Navlin, and say hello to my little friend, Ileana Castillo.
Hey, how are you, Lee?
Good. You like that? That's from Scarface, Al Pacino.
I see that.
Remember that with the Uzi? And that's again. So I'm kind of.
I kind of like the one you said last week. Karen's worst nightmare.
Karen's, yeah, well, that was a couple weeks ago. Karen's worst. That's very true as well.
Yeah.
Ileana, now we normally spend a few minutes catching up, talking with each other because, as you know, we don't see each other that often off the air.
No.
Except at the bar, we run into each other at the bar.
Sure, at the bar.
Yeah, like I'm sneaking in for a drink, and who's sitting at the other end of the bar is Ileana.
That's true.
So we normally catch up, but you know we're not going to catch up today because we have Maplewood and South Orange royalty in the house.
I know. This is going to be good.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for former Soma Board of Ed members Madhu Pai and Anthony Mazzocchi. Yes. I practiced that 3 times. Anthony Mazzocchi. I apologize. Anthony and Madhu, and it's actually Tony Mazzocchi. So it's great to meet you guys at the Soma Talks podcast. Madhu, I've met you a few times. Tony, this is the first time we're meeting. And one of the things I just wanted to talk about is when I first mentioned that Madhu was going to come onto the program, Ileana, she was kind of like, well, she's kind of good looking, isn't she? And so I was like, yeah. So Ileana's like, She's like, I don't know. See, Ileana wants to be the most attractive woman.
Ileana, you're adorable.
No, that's not true. And you're believing him?
So perhaps we have a tie here. But I was worried that perhaps Ileana would be a little jealous, but it doesn't seem to be the case. You guys seem to be getting along. This is good. Now, actually, I'm a little jealous. Tony, a little bit. He's kind of a good-looking guy, Tony.
Look at the arms. Look at the arms.
Ileana, who's better looking? Would you? You know, I hate to put you on the spot, but
Madhu Pai.
Not even close.
Madhu Pai.
Thank you.
I'm the one who's a little jealous, actually. I'm a little frustrated by that. But no, Tony and Madhu, it's a pleasure to have you guys
yes, it
on.
totally is.
We have so much to talk about. Now, first off, I think we've branded you guys. Would you guys be all right if we started calling you Mad and Maz, perhaps? Because Mad is a Madhu Pai, and you know.
I work in marketing. I always appreciate good branding.
All right, so there you go, Mad and Maz. So if you guys had your own podcast, it's Mad and Maz podcast, right
Tony
there.
doesn't look that thrilled, though.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it. Do what you need.
Well, Maz must have been Matt must have been your nickname as a kid, right? Maz. The kids had to call you that in baseball and football. Whatnot.
I had many nicknames. That was not top 5.
Well, you also have Anthony. You have Anthony. You have Tony. You see, Ant, I guess. My name's Lee, so I never had a nickname. If I had a name like Anthony,
I've had nicknames.
Oh man, I would probably go by Tony. You know, I would probably be.
Yeah.
You know, because people don't fuck with Tonys. You know, and apologize for courtesy for all you under 18-year-old that are listening to the Soma Talks podcast because we're going to talk Board of Ed stuff. So that's things kids love to talk about, right? Board of Ed.
Is it the kids or the grown-ups?
I think so, yeah.
Or the parents?
Yeah, I think everyone's talking about it nowadays. It's become very frustrating here in Soma. So where do we start? What do we guys want to talk about? Do we want to talk about the upcoming election? You want to talk about concerns? And Madhu, right before we went to air, you were talking a little bit about the lines at the guidance office.
That's the most recent one. Let's start there.
No, how about we start with how Madhu and I met?
You know what? I don't think a lot of people know that story. That is true. Go.
The
Please
origin
do.
story. You want to tell it?
How did you guys
It's a
met?
good one.
Well, Madhu knows everyone in Soma, but we had never met each other. And we met each other for the first time on the Board of Ed.
That's true.
And 2017?
Yes, that's right.
And I think we spoke on the phone once briefly before I got on the board, but we didn't. We
Tony
never
was
met.
begging me to vote for him. I said I'd think about it.
Okay, you know.
So that's so it was a pitch. It was a political pitch.
She has her own history. It's totally fine.
Well, basically, I mean, so you knew that Madhu had been on the board, and right, you were aware of her background as being somebody who was involved. So I guess
at that point, I'd been watching. I had been watching on the Board of Ed. As a matter of fact, so I was the district supervisor of the arts when Madhu was on the Board of Ed.
Yes.
And so, anyway, I got on the board, and I'd run my own campaign. I guess we can talk about what that actually
What year are we
means
talking
later.
about?
Those lawn signs.
2017.
Wow.
Okay.
I ran in 2016, didn't get it.
Okay, so 2016 you ran, you lost.
Right.
Okay, got your feet wet and kind of figured
But
out
then
what you
you
did
won
wrong.
the next
And then
year.
the following year you ran again.
Yeah.
And figured out a lot actually in 2016.
Sure,
really understood what was going on, and we could talk about how that works now and how that worked back then. Campaign managers, all these kind of things. But I ran pretty much on my own, and didn't get trounced, but definitely saw that it's like, oh wow, there's a hill to climb here. Right. But anyway, when I got on the board, Madhu was open to speaking and discussing and having conversations, which actually ultimately I think all of us got along quite well on the board. Even though we had a lot of different opinions on things, we actually did get along on the board. And, at the time, it was kind of mind-bending. But looking back, especially watching the iterations of the board from 2021 on, I look back on our board and I say, you know what? I mean, this was a functional board. So anyway, Madhu was open to speaking with me and getting to know me. And ultimately, I mean, fast forward, she and I didn't agree on everything. We never agreed on everything. As a matter of fact, we voted, opposite a few times as well. And we were always able to do it, have a conversation about it, sometimes even heated, and make that happen. And it was really a model of what I expected.
Well, that's
from
good.
board
I mean,
members.
right, you have a difference of opinion, but you can work together. Perhaps
Yes.
the recent board, is there an issue there where maybe that's the biggest problem? Is there some egos involved as opposed to we're going to come together and work as a group?
It was a different time, I feel like, when Tony and I served on the board.
It does feel different times. I agree.
Yeah, well,
You're right.
just in terms of how the board, you're right, Lee, how we operated and how we kind of collaborated and how we, the whole role of the board, right, is to fashion one voice out of 9 voices so that you can give direction to the superintendent. That can be difficult sometimes when you're on different pages with different issues. But I feel like we had we had respect for each other. There were definitely some, difficult and loud conversations when the doors were closed, as there should be, right? You don't want 9 people who agree on everything. You want 9 people who are bringing different perspectives into the room and then, the negotiation. But at the end of the day, I feel like, we all kind of worked together, we collaborated, we knew our role, and the one thing we never did really is, attack each other, right? Which unfortunately has kind of become a hallmark of the recent boards. There's just this level of, I don't know what
But
to even
that
call
wasn't
it.
always like that. Because
It
when I moved
wasn't.
to Maplewood, I never heard about any drama in the Board of Ed. Like, there were disagreements, but not to the
It's
level.
more like local,
But it got-
the municipality offices,
But it never got-
mayor and those guys would fight, and the Board of Ed always seemed to be kind of,
Yeah, but then it got all of a sudden bullying Board of Eds to the point that one of them had to quit and everything. Like, it got nasty, and everybody's like, "What's going on?"
Would you say
Like,
that's a function of just new personalities coming into town, young
Or
people, or is it more of a
influence from other
influence
parties?
from other parties that are
where did it go wrong?
right?
Where did it go
If
wrong?
you could pinpoint a problem that exists,
Well, I think it's kind of a microcosm of the entire nation. I mean, right now, everything it needs to be binary oftentimes, right? You're right, you're wrong, you're with us, you're against us,
Right.
absolutist, and oversimplification of actually some very complex issues. And so, we're seeing that nationally. We're seeing that in our small town and small towns. And, I'd like to see that pendulum swing because really when it comes down to it, it's just, it doesn't work that way. And that's not the case. So, yeah, the Like you said, Ileana, I mean, where do you say, what are you doing tonight? Oh, I'm watching the Board of Ed. I can't miss this. You bring the popcorn. I mean, what's going
That's
on there,
basically
right?
it.
I think CNN and Fox News and whatnot are watching the local Board of Ed meetings too, and they certainly have because of. I mean, I'm friendly with a teacher who says she has a friend. She's a teacher here in Maywood, and her friend says, "Oh, were you guys on the news tonight again?" And it's like it's become like a
It
regular
is
running
true.
gag.
It's bad, and I think it gets in the way of the work, right? That's the truth. I mean, when we were on the board, we knew we had a lot of work to do. There were a lot of big initiatives, and ironically, Tony and I mean, I served for 2 terms, he served for 1, but both of us were in the minority when we served on the board, right? And we both still feel like we got a lot done while we were on the board. So, we were kind of focused on the work, where I feel like in recent times it's become kind of a lot of drama and acrimony just for the sake of drama and acrimony.
Well, just to piggyback on that is that, if you think right now is really rough in district, 2015 was incredibly rough. That was the lowest of the lows. We just had an unbelievably ineffective superintendent leave. We were not getting our state aid. We were laying off, teachers and staff year over year over year. We had over 100 curricula out of compliance. We weren't even meeting basic state muster under, for
Who
lack
was
of
the
a
superintendent at that time?
John Ramos.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, board policies hadn't been updated in a while, and I'm saying this while I was on the board. But the fact
but
of the
it's
matter
all
was,
true. Let's be
and
honest.
this is what happens with leadership. And the fact of the matter is, and I think what people have kind of been led to believe over the years is that the board does more than the actual board does as far as administering the district. And as a matter of fact, the board has spent time administering the district, and that will always happen when there's weak leadership.
Right.
When we had this interim superintendent for Carr, like him or not, I happen to like him.
I
I'm
like him too.
proud to call him a friend right now. He spent a lot of time,
He
leading.
came in after Ramos,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. He was the interim, and he
Yep.
was making some
And he's-
changes with the principals and whatnot. And
Well, yeah, there was a
Oh,
lot of
he
that.
made some changes.
Yeah.
There was a lot of churn. But the fact of the matter was, he said, look, this is where your curriculum is. This is where the policies are. The buildings are literally falling down. You think they're falling down now, in 20,
Right.
and on and on. And he led up, with the board. And said,
Do
this
you
is what you have to
actually
do.
believe 2015 was worse than what we've been through in the last 3 years?
Well, go ahead.
No, I think it was as bad. And listen, I just want to be clear that the problems that the district is having is because we have weakened our infrastructure and not kind of paid attention to the things that are important for over a decade now, right? So, John Ramos came in and because we had him do this big kind of visioning exercise, when we went to implement it, we realized like all of our infrastructure was broken and weak, and we literally couldn't implement anything because, everything was just a mess. And that wasn't necessarily his fault. He wasn't the right person to clean it up in a way that Fakara was. But, this had been going on. We also had a long-term soup for a long while before Fakara who just let things go in all the wrong ways.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and well, the last thing I'll say is that fair enough. Comparing 2015
Tim.
and almost 2025 now is difficult. But the fact of the matter is, yes, this previous superintendent, in my strong opinion, which I was pretty loud about, sent the place into the dark ages, and in many ways. And I think where I differ from some other people is I don't use. COVID can't be an excuse. It wasn't because
That
of
was
COVID.
a tough time, too.
It was a very tough time. However, right, we were getting COVID funding. A lot of things were going on. It is not an excuse. There are a lot of people doing some really good work. I saw COVID as a time where you saw leadership either step up and show what they're all about, or step back and show what they're all about. Right.
Right.
Yep.
Right. I
And
mean,
that's what
every
we
school system was hit by COVID in the country, in the states.
Absolutely.
This one seemed to struggle a little bit more than
Well,
most.
and guess what? Every school district nearly in the state, except for us, were able to reopen effectively, right, when the time was right. So, I think we've had a string of not so great administrators operationally in the district, leaders, I should say, superintendents for the better part of a decade. And so I'm really excited about Mr. Bing.
Excellent.
He seems like somebody who is operations minded in the same way that Thomas Ficara was
Okay.
operations minded. And he brings with him some great experience. I mean, just even his BOCES experience is exciting, right? And thinking about how do we serve all kids and all interests. So
I have $1 million question for you guys because this is a question I think every parent in Soma wants to know. Since both of you were former Board of Eds, maybe you can give a little bit of a brief opinion about this. How did we got here? Like, can you pinpoint how the school district got to this mess?
One thing in 2015, it was rough.
Because-
It was rough going. Yeah. So was if that was bad, did it ever get better? Or
No, I mean
has it been like a
bad
straight
because
line?
everything is bad. Is it not? Is it the money can't hire more teachers, or the IEP is not working well, and because of the buses, like we're letting go teachers. Like, how did we got to this mess?
Yeah,
Like,
that's
is
good,
there
yeah.
like a date or a superintendent did wrong or a board of ed that failed? Like, where how do we got here to
The
this
district-
point that we can't get our shit together? And sorry to say that word, but it's true.
No, listen, the district ebbs and flows, right? You've got high times, you've got low times. And taking a step back, let's just be honest about that. The fact that public education is really difficult. It's not properly funded, right? And so you're already kind of starting from, a place of net pain, right, financially. But I will say we were kind of on a fiscal cliff, right, in around 2015. And then over time with Dr. Ficara, we did a lot of work as a board. And then I left the board and Tony continued that work in terms of shoring up our budget, in terms of, paying a lot of attention to forecasting, in terms of shoring up our reserves. And by the time Dr. Ficara left here, we were in pretty strong financial,
We were
situation.
good. We were good.
Better.
We
Probably
were
better.
good.
Yeah.
We were good. And then over, I would say, the next 4 or 5 years, we really did not do a good job managing our finances.
Was
Which
that who should we blame for that?
listen,
Or is it a combination of many things?
Well, at the end of the day, agree with
In your
everything. Mara.
opinion, of course.
You can't, people want to oversimplify a very complex system. So it's not fair to do that, and I'm not going to do that. However, you got to tether yourselves on how the system works. And the bottom line is the superintendent is the educational and operational leader of the district. And when one superintendent leaves, actually, in this case, not under duress, Thomas Ficara had a deadline.
He was an interim, and he was contracted for a certain amount of time, and
Correct.
he was like a turnaround specialist, so to speak.
That's
Yeah,
exactly
and
right.
there was a lot to turn around, and he set up the table, and he set it up quite well, I might add, all the way to the point where a district office was fully interim. Now, people complained about that, but these were pretty talented interims, and the next person could come in, and it's like handing the baton over, and develop the cabinet in not only their vision, but according to what needs to happen next. And so the superintendent of schools needs to own that, right?
So after Ficara, who was the superintendent? Was it
Dr. Taylor.
Dr. Taylor? Kind of.
So and then the board is built around that. And so when Madhu says ebbs and flows, what I see is when you have kind of a vacuum in leadership, what comes in to fill it? Board and members of the board, and that never goes well. There's not a place in the world where that goes well, and I think that's how these things happen. So I know everybody wants to blame one person. If you have to blame one person, blame the leader,
Right.
which is
Right.
the superintendent.
Right, the buck stops here. Ileana and I are probably think about this a little bit differently. Her children are still in the school system, so she deals every day with the angst and the anxiety. And my son's out. He's graduated. He's long a grown up. So I'm less say his fault, her fault. But I'm more interested in if for instance if with Mr. Bing, I know he's a Union County guy, local guy. That hopefully that's good. But if he calls you two into his office and said, "Okay, help me fix this. Where would you start? What would the first things you would say to him? This is what needs to be done.
Yeah, before Madhu goes, if a superintendent
I saw her eyes.
calls a board member into their office and asks how to fix it, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
Right,
But
yeah.
you know, but I know where you're going with that.
In the imaginary world of
Oh, at least say, where do you think I should focus more now?
Yeah, how did we get here, and how do I fix it, guys?
Yeah.
What might you suggest?
Or,
Listen,
yeah.
there's a couple of things I think that factor into how we got here. Mismanagement of our finances, right? High administrative turnover. So to Tony's point, you know, Dr. Ficarra and the board intentionally kind of had these very talented interims in the central office cabinet when he was here. They did yeoman's task of, you know, just cleaning things up, right? Our special ed was starting to like be vibrant, right? Our programming and strong and stable servicing kids. That's just one example. But we really wanted, and then the budget, sorry. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, we got the budget in a good place. And so it was a gift handed over to the next superintendent very intentionally. And within, you know, not that long of a time, Dr. Taylor was able to hire his entire cabinet, right, his central office staff. And then I think within 2 years, there was like full turnover, right?
So the whole cabinet was cleaned out,
So-
basically.
clean out.
He brought in his own people.
There was, so that was disruptive. And then, you know, without good fiscal management, right, it's very hard to do anything. So you've got two kind of big factors working against you. Of course, COVID happened. That was obviously very disruptive. You know, negotiations. It's so important for a leader to have a good relationship with the administrative staff and the teachers. And when you don't have that, things can't ever go well if the people who are in front of the children every day
that's been
caring
clear.
for them,
Yeah.
right, are not feeling valued and are not feeling, you know, like their voices are heard. So you had that going on. You know, so I just think it was a kind of a confluence of events that all happened to be negative things that came together. And, you know, the district really kind of fell apart in the last couple of years. And I will say one thing this district is very good at, which isn't nearly a net positive, is initiative-itis. We just love to throw new things into the mix. So when Tony and I, you know, were on the board, when we left the board, we had two huge initiatives that we had started. Intentional integration, right?
Yeah.
That's a triple
Very
I.
necessary.
Yeah.
Yep. You know, was going to really do a good job of making our schools feel more like our communities, right? And all of the benefits that come with that.
Now, can you explain triple I just briefly
Yeah.
for those out there, including myself, that
Yes.
are very confused by
I'm
it?
going to finish my thought and then I'm going to explain triple I.
Thank you.
And then the second initiative was around the long-range facilities plan, right? Because our physical plant was literally crumbling. Tiles were falling off elementary school, you know, buildings
bad.
and
Yeah.
going to hit kids. These are two huge, humongous initiatives, right? And we should have really focused on that, and we should have just focused on kind of, you know, making all of our existing programming, like special education, like the arts, like our curriculum, stronger. But, you know, in the last couple of years, we've had like all sorts of, you know, crazy policies come through. Let's de-level, let's do this, you know, which is
That's another topic.
yeah, I mean,
leveling.
it's really not a good way. You have to be focused as a district, especially a district, you know, a public school district that isn't like flush with $1 billion of cash, right? So one of the things we're not very good at here is focus. And I hope that this board with, you know, Mr. Bing in place will really, really be focused on what the district really needs to get done and do that with excellence. I don't know, Tony, if you want to add anything, I can talk about III after that.
Yeah, you could talk more about that, but you know, yes, for that moment, right, with III and the long range facilities plan, there was a real opportunity, and there was also an opportunity to be quite innovative with that, and there were a lot of questions like, how are we going to do this? And of course, there were these ideas that got thrown around. Let's make all the elementary schools K through 4. Make one of the middle schools 5, 6, the other one 7, 8, and go from that, and all of these other ideas, so that, you know, by the way, when you do that in 6th grade, everybody's, you know, the integration would have occurred, you know, earlier as well. Some curricular issues, possibly themed schools were thrown around, and it was a very exciting time. And I think then when the handoff to Dr. Taylor happened, he had to really decide whether he was going to go with that direction that we had decided upon, which we had, not necessarily the structures of the K through 4, right? That was up in the air, but we ended up on what I call kind of Berkeley Light. It was related to the Berkeley integration program. There's a formula. There's a way to divide up the neighborhoods but that was very disappointing to me personally. I thought that sometimes we take the path of least resistance and the easier way out, and as it so happens, it wasn't the path of least resistance, right? Because here we are with the busing debacle and a lot of other things. But that said, to Madhu's point, it was finances. It was finances, but it was a lot more than that as well. Because Madhu said, yes, the interims turned over in the upper administration when the new superintendent came in, and then they turned over again.
Right.
And in some cases, they turned over again.
So every year or two, you have a whole new group of people making decisions for our children, and then when you're frustrated with them, they're gone.
So now we're going to talk about Board of Ed politics, which is, I chuckle a little bit, and of course I'm looking forward to asking the candidates, the incumbents who are running again, why they're using stability as their core tenet of their, because when you talk about that, I wonder what that means to them. What does stability mean? Well, sure, of course, let's not have turnover. But there was an insinuation, not only an insinuation of vote to keep the previous superintendent, Dr. Taylor, who was completely underperforming, and there was a vote to keep him in the spirit of stability, where ironically everybody under him was churning because of his lack of, administrative acumen.
Okay.
Right?
And not only Dr. Taylor, but the business administrator, right, who, to my mind, is a huge part of the problem that we find ourselves in today, right? Why there are lines of kids in the hallways of CHS.
But it
waiting
was
for
almost
guidance.
half of the Board of Ed that wanted to keep Dr. Taylor and the BA.
Correct.
It was half of them. Do we know why they wanted to keep them? Like, if there's a specific reason, or because they liked them, or they thought he was doing a good job, or
I guess for stability, but I would say, what stability have we had here in the last couple of years, right? It's been anything but stable. There's been just instability everywhere you look, badly implemented policies like III, turnover, right? A board that was, more focused on fighting itself than doing its work.
Yeah, and it's a good question, and the public gets to ask and hear the answer to that in this Board of Election season. Is stable mediocrity better because it's stable than the change and what may come with change? Is change unstable? Yes, in some ways it is, but it leads to stability if you know what's right in front of you. Is completely unstable. So the idea of just keeping somebody so that they don't go away is interesting to me, and obviously I don't ascribe to that philosophy.
Before we go into the III, quick question. I feel like the public feels like the Board of Ed is divided into two, them versus us. You guys feel that way? I always feel like when I'm hearing the Board of Ed, it's like it's two groups.
Well,
it's not like mixed up.
Well, you don't really have to feel that way because you see them vote that way. So I mean,
a lot of 5-4 votes.
a lot of 5-4. So they, but yeah, to what we were saying before, right? There is kind of this binary nature of decisions, right? You're right, you're wrong, and you see it playing out, in public meetings with some infighting in that regard, and that's obviously not productive. You see it in the votes,
No.
but and that existed, by the way. As Madhu said at the beginning. I mean, we were in the minority in a lot of ways because a lot of votes could be 7-2.
I mean, some before you talk, a lot of Board of Ed have had like heated up, like Alyssa Malespina, Miss Wright, Kamal. Was Kamal? Yeah, your friend that got bullied. Like, it's not easy being a Board of Ed. Like, how do you
It's ironic because when I ran for the board 100 years ago in, 2012, 2013, there really were two campaign managers from, two
Caitlin,
sides
sorry.
who ran Board of Ed campaigns. And over time, one of those sides, my side, right, it kind of drifted away, that whole campaign manager. And what ended up happening, which I think is great, is more independent people started to run, right, that weren't necessarily affiliated with a campaign manager. And so, you look at the slate that we
What
call
are you laughing? What are you laughing?
Well, because those independent people were people like me, and you realize you almost had no chance because the infrastructure that existed with the one campaign machine.
That's true.
Which, by the way, look, talk about 100 years ago. Getting anybody to run for the Board of Ed was nearly impossible. So
Well,
you
the
know,
pay is great, though, my understanding. Right? So I'm surprised it would be that difficult. Did it give you anything, by the way, for the
No.
is there nothing, no.
lots of thanks at every board meeting.
Yeah,
No,
there's no
I'm kidding.
stipend, like $50 a month, or there's nothing. It's
You just get the dirty look.
right. You just get yelled at by your
But I-
neighbors
Yelled
when the
at.
school bus shows up late.
I think it's important to note that, I commend the people previously who wanted to help people navigate running for what is public office. Look, there's government paperwork. You've got to spend some money. You have to really get your name, which no one knows for the most part,
Sure.
out to the two towns, and on and on and on.
That's true.
And, there are some people who may want to run for board, and as soon as they find that out, they're like, oh, my God, I can't even do this. And so, and if they do, they're already 5,000 votes behind because this, infrastructure exists. So the infrastructure itself is not bad.
With campaign managers and people familiar with how the system works and how to get the vote,
Absolutely.
how to attract.
In a lot of
people to
ways,
your
they're
name.
doing a good deed. When a hobby becomes an obsession, it's not great.
Right.
And when there is an ideological litmus test in order to be run, I think that's that could be a dicey thing. And there's where you get into you're either with us or you're against us. When I ran for board, and I know Madhu remembers this, because I wasn't part of the crew at the time, there was this idea that since they were for equity, that I must be anti-equity,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Okay.
And there was that false binary that was created. We're almost out of that nonsense, which is really nice, but that was there for a while as well.
Well, I think parents are very frustrated right now with everything that's going on. So I think people, maybe there's more drama as a result, but I think they want to hear less drama. They just want want results
agree.
at this point.
I think also to address something Ileana said, I actually, when I look at the votes, I don't think it's, us versus them or them versus them. If you look at the votes, interestingly, what's happened with more independents running is that you have actually a group of people who do vote as a block, right? And then you have, the Reginas and Nubias and, Caitlins and of the world, and who don't always vote in the same way, right?
Yeah.
And I actually think that's great.
I agree.
Right? Because now you're getting different perspectives, and in the back room when they're kind of negotiating, right, for which way to vote, they're communicating those different perspectives, and then they're voting on those different perspectives. And I think, that is diversity in action, right? And that is what you want from your board. You want different perspectives.
But also, just to give, some people due credit, when they voted to non-renew the business administrator, there were members of, if you want to call it, right, one little block, who actually voted to get rid of them. And there's always that, look, there's always that. And there's also healthy dissent. I mean, you obviously want a board to be unanimous in its decisions through consensus, right? That's what you want. But 7-2, 6-3, 5-4, it's not necessarily unhealthy all the time.
So we're going to take a short break. Come right back with the Soma Talks podcast. We want some word from our sponsors, and we'll talk about III. We're also going to talk about some of the candidates that are running for the Board of Ed. So we'll be back in just a moment.
Welcome, Miss Love.
Who do you think you is?
I is the Board of Education.
Holy crap! You're from the Schoolhouse Rock Gang.
Coda Kitchen in the heart of Maplewood Village. but with a city vibe. Come check out Coda for great food and great company. Luke Finn and his team love presenting their customers with inspired and creative dishes using as much locally sorted organic produce as possible. At the bar, you'll find an assortment of craft draft beers and classic original cocktails. Lovely wines, too. Coda Kitchen, Maplewood's favorite local hangout, 177 Maplewood Avenue. Check them out. Coda Kitchen, the best. Maplewood Karate, conveniently located on Baker Street in Maplewood Village. Master Toledo's Japanese Karate is a martial arts studio with a community history and vibe. Maplewood Karate offers affordable martial arts classes for all ages, from the ages of 4 to adults, with a variety of classes to fit anyone's busy schedule. Check out Maplewood Karate. For more information, give them a call or a text at 914-213-9676. Maplewood Karate, that's 914-213-9676. Maplewood Karate, the best that Maplewood has to offer. And welcome back to the Soma Talks podcast. I'm Lee Navin with Ileana Castillo, and we are joined with Madhu Pai has come to say hello to us, along with Anthony Mazzocchi. I said your name wrong again, didn't I? Anthony Mazzocchi.
Correct.
Mazzocchi. Why can't I get that right? Has anyone ever mispronounced your name before, by the way, or am I the first one?
Yeah, you're the first.
Okay, I had a feeling, yes.
I thought your last name was pronounced Masucci, like Phil, but then I heard someone say it's Mazzocchi. I was like, oh.
Now, Phil Masucci, you have a something with him, don't you, Ileana? I believe a couple of them. Okay. All right, so, okay, so anyway, I just thought we would talk, but anyway, okay, we could change the subject, but but you brought him up, so
No, because I thought that it was
Masucci, but he was saying
was
during
named-
that you guys would get confused at Columbia High School. By the way, Tony went to Columbia High School. We didn't mention that earlier, but so you grew up in Maplewood, been here your whole life, and
Just about my whole life, yeah.
how's Maplewood changed, by the way, since the time you were a kid, other than the fact you pay the taxes now? But how have you seen the community change?
So we moved here from Denver, Colorado, and I was 8 years old. And we were here, and after the first weekend, my neighbor knocked on my door and asked me, I remember opening the door, and she says, "Why weren't you in church?" That's how it's changed.
Oh, wow.
Wow, very interesting. Yeah. Now people be like, "Pardon me."
I mean,
Excuse me. Have you mentioned religion?
Yeah, it wasn't. That wasn't ubiquitous.
But of course.
But it was 1981. It was very different. The town was not as diverse as it is now.
When I moved here in '98, everybody on my block was in their 70s. We were we were the only young family with kids, and we would know that because everyone would come over to see our little boy, because they were grandparents or whatnot, but they all lived there in the 70s. Then they started to, when the taxes started to jump, in the early 2000s. But you would raise a kid and then you'd stay in the community. But it's not like that anymore because the taxes are too high. The school system's taking much of that. But that's where I think the community started to change a little
In
bit.
98?
No, in the early 2000s, where all of a sudden you didn't have your 50 and 60 and 70-year-olds
I
anymore.
moved-
You had your 30s and 40s, and basically everybody has young kids, and that's...
When I moved in 2010, I think that's when it was starting to get diverse a tiny bit.
Yeah, and diversity is good, but there's also, it's not always good.
Just quickly, I would say that the school system when we grew up was quite extraordinary.
Oh, everybody says that.
Columbia High
Everybody
School
says that.
was, I grew
Blue
up in
ribbon
Livingston.
school.
Yeah, and people talked about
District.
Columbia High School.
People said that back in the
as-
day, it's not even a shadow of what
yeah,
it is.
Yeah. But
But you know what is the same? Actually, I'll just quickly say what is the same, despite the system. And I think we can get back to it, which is why, look, I wouldn't be involved in the schools the way I am. I don't think Madhu would be involved if we weren't optimistic about it. Anybody who wants to see dysfunction and destruction, there's no place for that. I'm very optimistic. But, we look to our left and our right when we were kids here, and who's graduated from here. And if you had a dream, my dream was to be a classical musician in a major symphony orchestra. And everybody said, yeah, okay, sure, I can do that, And there was nothing like, oh, that's something other people do. And that feeling permeated a lot, not all, but a lot of the system, the students who were here. And, that was very special. And I think that exists, that really does exist here. My children feel that. And I think others do as well. I just think that feeling is created a little more despite the system and from outside and volunteers in the community. And we need to get back to kind of, making that the lifeblood of the actual system. And look, the teachers obviously are doing really amazing work in that regard. Administration and how it functions, we need to catch up to that kind of stuff.
There are great teachers in this community. Question: music, yeah. So arts programs have been cut. I'm not sure if that affects the music programs, but I'm sure it's a difficult situation. There's no trade schools in the area. It's basically, it seems like if you're a Maplewood kid or a South Orange kid, it's college or bust. It doesn't seem like there's other opportunities. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we've slowly chipped away at that. I'm sure people were telling Tony he could live his dream of being a classical musician because they were still funding the arts at that point, right?
Ability to focus on that.
We did have VOTEC here at one point, right? But we did away with it. And so, that's the really exciting thing about Mr. Bing. He kind of has that background. And I think he knows firsthand that college might not be the end destination for all kids, right? And so the ability to think about how we fiscally, manage our budget, responsibly manage our budget to kind of fund, what different kids need would be amazing. Which, to veer off on a tangent for 1 minute, but this is what makes me so upset about the whole push
Here comes the upset Madhu. This is where it's getting good.
Well, no, I mean, this whole idea of deleveling, right? We live in a community where, diversity is valued, except, when it comes to learning, right? Mm-hmm. Our students are diverse learners. Our world is moving to a place around personalization and individualization, right? And here we are, here are some people saying, oh, no, we think everybody should have the same in the classroom, even though everybody's not the same, right? And so I just feel like, we've kind of lost our way a little bit because we've let ideology take over in some really bad ways.
Is deleveling still...
Oh,
because I know that was years ago. Did that ever take hold, or
Lee, it has not. It has been brought up every year for the last 20 years in one way or another. Last year, we had a whole policy that was being, shoved through, a half-baked policy that one of the Board of Ed candidates right now called a fully baked policy, weirdly. That was being pushed through. And Dr. Taylor was saying, hey, board, even if you don't agree with this policy, which many of them didn't, I can do it anyway. Right? So, deleveling is one of those, I think, ideological stakes in the ground that, some people here will never give up on.
So for new parents, deleveling to the community, like, what? That. So, I guess it's basically... You're getting rid of honors classes and you're getting rid of intermediate classes and
listen,
is that the basic idea? Where
yes,
all kids are going to be in the same level, which is stupid.
At the most basic level, it just means that yes, you have a homogeneous classroom, right? I'm sorry, not you have a classroom where every kid is getting the same thing, right? So you don't have leveled classes. And by the way, this district has a history of having like weird micro leveling, which isn't good either. When I was on the board under Ficarra, we actually truncated a lot of levels, very necessary at Columbia High School because, some of these lower level classes, nobody was taking them seriously, right? Kids weren't learning. They weren't doing what they needed to be doing. So, it does make sense to be responsible about leveling, right? But not every kid is going to take AP. So you need to have some sort of an honors class for, kids who want to accelerate. And then, you really, for some reason in this district, grade level classes are, vilified as remedial. I don't know why. I never understood it.
But just to stay on this, and I think it's really important, in a Board of Ed campaign season that we actually talk about the policies of the incumbent candidates and who they're running with and the other candidates. And when we talk about what Madhu just said, as far as the de-leveling, that the current board president, who's running again, was a huge advocate of de-leveling the entire high school which, by the way, I think if they were sitting here, they would not know what that means. They would not be able to articulate what that means, what they look
And
that
that's
looks
Dr.
like.
Telesford? Is that who?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did he say why he wants to take away the leveling? Like why?
Well, I am not going to. I think he
He never.
explained himself.
He did explain it.
I think he explained himself a little bit. But what he did say was the policy, which is really the words behind the actions, which was rather vague, was fully baked. So not only has he, told us, which is good. It's good information, and being transparent about it is good. But it's very important to note that he wants to de-level the entire high school. And he thought that the policy that was put forward was a good one. I happen to absolutely disagree with both of those things vehemently, and I believe that most of the community does as well.
So Telesford is running on a ticket with Aaron Vadlamani.
Arun.
Arun Vadlamani. Arun, I mispronounce everyone's name.
Aaron, I said Aaron.
Seems to be my
Arun.
thing.
I'm
So
sorry.
Arun Vadlamani.
It's his
Who,
fault.
by the way, I've spoken to him a few times. Gentleman, seems like a really nice guy.
Yes.
Offered me some advice on our podcast, actually. But he declined to come on. But perhaps that'll change.
His loss.
And then Bethany Joseph, that's one ticket. And they're running basically against, even though these are individual votes, but they're running against Bennett, Capadilla, and Gleason Brown. And then I guess there's also Paul Stephen. Okay, so I'm not sure.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he's been quiet.
Yeah,
I think
right, so-
Steve Latt's behind that candidate.
Right. So
I don't know about that. I don't know.
who's involved with
I don't know who's involved with that, but those are the two slates, and you know what? This is great. We have a lot of choice. There's going to be a lot of discussion around the schools. Incumbents, for better or worse, have to run on their record and their votes and their ideas, and people who are wanting to step in there have to run on their ideas as well. And I think it's really great that the community gets to hear that. It's why, like I have a hole in my head. I ran, a write-in campaign last year with Jeff because, we weren't getting that. And so, to have 7 people running for 3 seats, we should be so lucky.
I agree. I have a.
sorry.
It is
No, I
pretty
was going to
awesome.
say I have an important question. They always say that the school district is broke. We don't have the funds. We don't have the funds. That's why we can't hire more teachers. Da, da, da. But recently, I've been reading that that's a lie. That there is money. So I wanted to hear your opinions. As far as you know, are we really that broke, or are they really have the money but they really don't want to spend it? Like, what's going on? Because I'm hearing mixed signals and all this. And I'm sure a lot of parents are like.
Well, for instance, they let go of some of the paraprofessionals. I think there was 80 of them that they let go, and then all of a sudden, when the parents went crazy, rightfully so, that their children weren't going to have the support that the IEP said that they were entitled to. Many were hired back instantly. So it seems like.
I don't know. I heard
you
it
know,
from good source that like they have the money. They don't
Yeah.
understand why they're not spending the money where they should be spending the money. So I wanted to hear your perspective, like where we are here, like.
There could be 2 things at work here. One is during COVID, we did get very generous COVID funding. And unfortunately, I don't believe the administration did a very good job being thoughtful about how to spend that money. And then in the end, I think we were just scrambling to spend the rest of the money. We ended up losing some of those funds because we didn't spend them. And then in the end, I don't even remember, but I remember being kind of,
So it's like a spend it or lose
horrified.
it,
Yes,
and then
yes.
as a result, maybe they're trying to spend it on things they don't need as opposed to things they need, and
Yes.
Kind of like the snowball effect.
So
it
that-
got too big for them to handle.
That wasn't thoughtfully planned. Also, and this has happened before. This happened when I first got on the board. When you get an influx of money like that and you don't have a business administrator or superintendent that forecasts out, you can expand your programming, right? So, when I first got on the board, they had expanded inclusion classrooms, which are so amazing. My daughter started her, South Orange Maplewood School District experience in an inclusion kindergarten classroom. Wonderful. 2 teachers, it was really, really a great experience. And then guess what? The next year, we didn't get that influx of, state aid again or federal aid. I think it was state aid. And then they had to unravel that whole program, right? So if you don't thoughtfully forecast and plan out, which the last business administrator fully admitted in public that he did not, then you're using a one-time cash infusion to expand programming that you can't sustain because, that money is not going to be there the following year, right? So that could have been one thing that happened. And then the COVID funding obviously was not, used. But the district always has some reserves in place, right? And you need to for your budgeting requirements. Um, but I also believe that those have been depleted in some pretty bad ways over the last couple of years as well. They were almost fully funded when Tony and I were on the board.
Yeah. I what I would add to that is, I post on Facebook probably more often than I'd like, but
We all do.
when I post on there, I really it's when something jumps out at me, especially as far as the Board of Ed is concerned, that really I would like to distill down to something simple that we could explain to parents who really are saying they're like, what the hell's going on? And as far as the budget's concerned, which I've tried to do for the last couple of years, which I've been terribly worried about, it's like seeing a train, wreck in slow motion with really one of the most untalented business administrators I've ever seen, and unfortunately supervised by one of the most untalented superintendents, is exactly what Madhu said. But look, a budget, when you have people who are on one side saying, "Oh my God, there's tons of money, we're not spending," or on another side saying we're totally broke.
Yeah.
The common theme there is they don't know enough about what's going on because there has not been enough transparency around it, and then they're
That's
left to
another
guess
one.
and come up with their own facts. That's a dangerous place to be because somewhere in the middle, there's the truth. The school budget, even though it would make your eyes glaze over, is rather simple as far as revenue in and expenditures out.
Who should be transparent with us? Like, who could be transparent to the community? Is the Board of Ed or the superintendent or who?
Well, look, I think where I'd push back on all of it is that everybody starts paying attention when the shit hits the fan, right? And they're like, well, why haven't you told us? They're like, actually, we've had a board meeting like 5 times and we've shown these slides. And just because you didn't look at it doesn't mean we're not being transparent.
Right.
So let's really be fair about that. But the fact of the matter is, especially in the last year, or even the year prior, when the BA sees that down the line things are going to be bad, which they can see in around October, right near the end of the year, it's like, hey, everybody, we need to cut back. This is what's going on. They, as Madhu said, they were using the COVID funding, which is this one-time influx of funds, to cover up larger problems of year-over-year expenditures, which were, a lot of different things, plugging the dam, and then guess what? The money was going to run out. Anybody in their right mind would have said, look, everybody, the money's going to run out in 2 years. Let's plan ahead. Look what we're doing. And there's just so much going on that they're funding.
And who falls to? The superintendent?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Look, I mean, who can it fall to? I will say it again. The superintendent is the educational administrative leader of the district. It is their job not only to be minding the house in that regard, but to be effectively communicating that to all of the district stakeholders all the time, whether you're talking to union leadership and collective bargaining, whether you're talking to the board, whether you're talking to the parents and everything else, right? And so here we are. So we are right here now where everybody's coming up with a lot of different, ideas about how much money we have, how much we don't. And I would say, by the way, that the budget in this district is very difficult because we don't have what are called ratables and large tax bases in which, to supplement the school. So it is not easy. But
all on the homeowner.
But the money that has been, people have pushed back on my use of the term mismanaged. I'm going to use the term mismanaged, has been real over the last 3 years. We did not need, this was self-inflicted. This did not happen to us. We did this to ourselves. We were the only district that had fully funded state aid that had these financial problems. We need to be honest with each other about it. The one thing that I've been upset about, actually, the last thing I'll say before Madhu says, when we talk about our board and recently, besides the divisiveness, I have seen a lot more spin in a small town that affects all of our children, all right? Our children go to school, they play with one another, They sing with one another,
Yep.
and the adults are behaving badly online while they're doing it, right?
That's basically how
But
it works.
you know, there should be no spin around this, and there absolutely should be no lying about it. And that, you know, I mean, I would like to think we could all agree on that. Otherwise, you know, what are we doing here? And I have seen spin, and I have seen a lot of mistruths, and that, you know, no one deserves. No one deserves, and we need to get past that. So yes, to the finances, don't spin it. Let's have a good talk about it. And the fact that everybody has a different idea about it is really evidence of a lack of transparency around it by leadership.
I also think when we talk about budget, it's not just the school budget. Remember, we have a gigantic long-range facilities plan, right? That is also using our tax dollars to fund, right? And we floated bonds. I mean, that's serious stuff.
Right.
And what we discovered last year was that the business administrator had just been kind of moving money around line items to, right, cover overages.
Mm-hmm.
So he basically gutted money from some line items like the field, Ritzer Field, right, at Columbia High School to fund other, whatever initiatives that he was running over on. So what really scares me when I think about the budget, actually, certainly what's happening with what we call the operating budget, right? That's all the things used to run the school district. But it's also the LRFP. And, how do we, do a audit of that budget to make sure that we have all the money that we need to get all the work
So
done?
you do agree we need to do an audit on the budget, right?
I think we need, people use the term forensic audit and all sorts of other things. I think we need somebody to really come in and do a deep dive on that budget and really see where, and including the LRFP, and see where, that money's going. I was actually shocked at the last Board of School Estimates meeting when, the entire conversation was around, oh, do we fund, $5 million or whatever it is for a turf field? And nobody thought to ask, why is the SOMS overage double the original cost of the entire SOMS job, right? So SOMS was budgeted for something like $11 million and had an overage, right? So that is above and beyond
Right.
the $11 million of $20 million. Why wasn't the conversation about that? Where's the accountability, right?
Who could call for a forensic accountant to come in and is that the
Superintendent?
Superintendent? Can he call that by himself? Is that the board has to vote on that? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, yes. If they wanted to hire somebody, the superintendent would have to recommend it. The board would have to, do it.
Approve it, yeah.
And I just want to, mention that all of that work for SOMS actually needed to get done, right? That building is falling apart just like the rest of our buildings.
Yeah.
But then, we raised money for that. Where is going to be the next gap that we find, right? That we don't have enough money to fund. And sure, I get it. During COVID, cost of goods went up, cost of labor went up, right? And that has still, it's still high. But where Tony is talking about transparency and you're talking about transparency, I don't know that anyone has a good understanding, right? I mean, in the public of why that, that overage was what it was. And those are our tax dollars. By the way, 60% of your tax dollars go to the school district, right? And then on top of that, we floated, right, bonds to cover the
pay me
the
now or pay me
long-range
later. That's what those
facilities plan.
bonds are. I mean, they're going to be due. And those families with the young children coming into the district right now, that's going to be on them in a few years.
Yeah.
So what might be your advice to those parents who have the young children in Marshall and some of the elementary schools? Perhaps they're not seeing the issues that the middle school and the high school they're going to do. What might you suggest? Go to private school, move, stick around.
Listen,
what's the advice for these people that are right now going, oh my God, what am I getting
You
myself
know where,
into?
So before you answer, you know where it starts? Middle school. Once kids finish middle school, I feel like it's half of the population go to private school. It's incredible. It's like they give a runaway to
That's
Columbia.
where the challenges
Yeah,
get to be
that's where it
insurmountable, and you feel like you need a change. for
Hey,
your
and
child.
listen, I have one child that went through the school district K to 12, and I have another who, went through the school district K to 7 because he was struggling at home during COVID, right? And so I think at the end of the day, you have to do what's right for your
For a
kid,
kid.
right? And the school district isn't right for every kid. It's not right for my second kid who is thriving, thriving, thriving in his public school, and it was good for my older child who, had a great experience here. But, if I could say one thing to parents, it would be pay attention. Not when something bad happens and you have to, pick your head up and advocate, but pay attention every minute of every day. Those board meetings are painful. Trust me, I know. Like I've sat there till 2 in the
On
morning.
both sides.
But, then read the Village Green synopsis, right? Or watch the YouTube and, forward wind through
That's
the
what I
Park
do. I
Board.
watch the YouTube.
Everybody needs to pay attention. And guess what? I think the gigantic debacle with the III implementation around transportation and busing actually forced that to happen. Younger parents, I think, are paying attention because, where they didn't feel the hurt before. I mean, elementary school
That's a
used to
good
be
point.
this loving, wonderful,
Right.
sweet kind of experience,
Is
right?
that
But not-
really working?
Well, now you can't get your kid to school and get to work on time, and all of a sudden that's,
Correct.
you're like, wait, I
Correct.
just missed my train. My boss is furious because there's no bus anymore.
Yeah.
You're right. That's a good point. So
Unfortunately, it has forced parents to pay
Wake up and say,
attention
"Whoa."
and wake up.
Yeah.
And it's really sad for me that that's what did it because I really believe the III, if implemented correctly, could be amazing for
Gotcha.
this district. But, this is
So you
where
think
it is.
it's really working right now, the III?
I would have no idea on that because guess what? I mean, I don't even know that we're measuring it, right? So, and what is the outcome? No one has stated that. Is it just to have schools that look like the larger community or
Was that what James David, PBW, came
no,
up
no,
with?
the
No,
III was
no.
Rocio Lopez talked to us a little bit about it, and basically, and I guess the idea is well, and as I've also talked to Jeff Bennett, who's brilliant guy when he explains it, and he basically told me it's a financial way to maybe get some of the families with less money into the same school with the kids who come from wealthier families, and you kind of even the score throughout the school system.
At the end of the day, the III has to have some sort of positive educational outcome for the kids. And the way to do that is to have schools that are diverse, right? Because there's, programmatic and educational value to that. And then there's also social emotional value to that,
Right.
right? But at the end of the day, these kids have to be better off both socially, emotionally, and educationally.
That's what Rocio said about the emotional part, that nobody's considering the kids' emotional.
Right.
Like, all their friends in this school, now I got to go alone. Like,
Right, yeah, the kid,
th-
one
they're
kid down
not
the street,
considering
he's
that
going
part.
to Boyden, and the other kids are
well,
going to Marshall, and
this is the
yeah.
problem. This is the problem of making educational decisions based on ideology, right? You forget to kind of think about what is the ultimate outcome and what is the educational value of this.
Should we get rid of the III?
No.
Too late for that?
Well, beyond
Because a lot of parents are not happy
but
with
Madhu seems to
that.
say if implemented correctly, it's a great thing.
But how long have we been doing this?
Well, listen, we have a new superintendent. Hopefully, we will have new
Better days
faces on the
ahead.
board.
Yeah.
And
Let's give 'em a
hope,
chance.
I hope that we've already made some positive strides, Tony, and I'll turn it over to you in a second. But if you think about what is best practice in intentional integration, right? The reason Tony calls it Berkeley Light is because Berkeley, it kind of failed in Berkeley, and then they had to make all these changes, right? And we know that. We know that going in, and yet we haven't done what Berkeley did. Berkeley had some semblance of, parental, choice, right? Not that parents could pick where their kids went to school, but they accounted for hardships. They accounted for, all the things that we are now repeating those mistakes, even though we know those mistakes, because we look at this as an ideological, kind of initiative and not one built out of, empathy and education value. And when I actually talk to some of the the candidates that have been running as I'm doing my research, because I really feel like we need people on the board who believe in an empathetic approach as well as one that is going to derive some educational value. I'm hearing that, and that's encouraging.
Yeah. So, would you be comfortable telling us who you recommend people vote for? You know, how do we get out of this mess, and who are the candidates that are going to hopefully take the lead in getting us to where we could very well where we should be?
I am very much supporting and am very involved in the campaigns of Bennett, Capadia, and Brown.
Okay.
That's not the right order, is it? It's Bennett, Brown, Capadia.
I
Okay.
don't know. I have a lawn sign.
I, you know what? I have
So
to
you have
check
the
it out.
same lawn sign.
But you know what?
Madhu.
Yeah, what I like about them a lot is first of all, you noted Jeff. I mean, Jeff is brilliant. He's a brilliant
He
man
is very brilliant.
and a very thoughtful person, and a guy of great integrity. Anybody who meets him, even if you absolutely disagree with him, you know he's coming at it with integrity. He's willing to listen. He's willing to have the discussion. He is a very collaborative and thoughtful human being, as is Deirdre, as is Bimmel. When you meet these three, I mean, we would be very lucky to have them. Now, look, with all due respect to the other candidates, again, I think two things can be true. You know, we can thank them not only for their service or wanting to run, but you know, as far as wanting to keep the previous superintendent, wanting to keep the previous business administrator, wanting to de-level the district. Those three, that's.
I think they're going to lose a lot of votes for that.
Well, I would say those three things for me are disqualifying.
Sure.
You know, those are disqualifying. And you know, again, we can thank them for their service. I also think that the tone and tenor on the board it can be a lot better.
Okay.
And I think that these three will add that value greatly.
I honestly have not felt this hopeful about the district in a while. I feel
Really?
really optimistic.
That's
yeah,
excellent. Yeah.
That's good.
And I feel like we have a new superintendent. And listen, the board's primary responsibility is to oversee and collaborate with the superintendent for, to have a great school district, right? And so this election is incredibly important because you need the right board members there to help work with the
Correct.
superintendent, right? I think for me, I think about, given that sense of optimism, right? My inclination is that we need fresh perspective all around.
Yeah.
And I, in some ways, I think Caitlin Whitletter did more for students in this district than any other board president
I like Caitlin.
in a long time. And people don't realize how much positive impact she's had because of all the lies, the specious lies that have been told about her and that have become suddenly like the narrative, right? It's really unfortunate and terrible.
Once things take off on social media, some people tend to believe what they read, and
when you have your own colleagues perpetuating those lies, people tend to believe that. Having said that, I think the reason that I think the incumbents will have a difficult time, and honestly should, is because we should have a fresh slate, right? We need to have a board that is fully functional. And I hate to say it, but, those two people have been at the heart of causing a lot of the angst that has gone on, and we just can't have that right now.
So you're both basically going for Bennett,
Brown
endorsing
and-
Brown.
Yeah, it's
Bennett.
funny. I don't know the other two, right?
Yep.
So Bethany's a known entity, lovely. Jeff, super smart, analytical. So yeah, I've been reading up. I actually just had a few conversations with the other two, Bimmel Kapadia and Deirdre Brown. They blew my socks off. Blew my socks off.
Good.
Deirdre, for all the talk of like analytics and data,
I heard good things about Brown.
she, I think, can walk the walk in a way that no other board member, who, aside from Jeff, who's talked about data, can, walk the walk. And I was really, really impressed just by her, just very, I would say, pragmatic approach to what the district should focus on, right? Which is, she said, let's go back to kind of like fixing the things. Let's go back to like basics and make sure we have a strong operational district, which I thought was great. And Bimmel is also like a super smart guy. He, works in the communication field. And so I think, again, you need somebody like that just to help the district figure out how are we going to like be transparent, communicate. Always when you're in the field of marketing like he and I are, you're always thinking about client centricity and the customer first, right? And that means the students are at the forefront of his mind. That means the teachers are at the forefront of his mind. That means the community is at the forefront of his mind. And that's how he's going to help the superintendent kind of, serve those populations. And so I am really, really excited about the slate. I have their lawn sign, as I said, on my yard. And I feel like with them and, some of the board members we have now working with the superintendent, like this school district is going to just be amazing.
Oh, I
it would
hope
be really
so.
good. I mean, the last thing I would say is, and by the way, unprompted by me, this slate of three is very passionate about arts, career technical education, and is a very big part of their slate. Their children are steeped in the arts. I know Deirdre's and Bimmel's and even Jeff's. And they've been paying very close attention to that because, as you said, Lee, they've been cut pretty viciously over the last 3 or 4 years with the incumbents at the helm. I mean, it's as simple as that. They voted on a budget that really has marginalized the arts, so that cannot be lip service anymore. And of course, I've been very upset about that. I'm going to put a really quick plug in for the nonprofit we created, Music Arts Education
Oh,
Project.
yeah,
and we,
that's good.
with the help of a lot of people in the community, we were able to back fund a lot of these cuts. I know the district put some skin back in the game, but that is COVID funding. That's very short. I don't know how they found it. It was left over. It wasn't spent. No comment. But the fact of the matter is that, this is the best thing we do here, the arts and creative subjects, and I'm glad that they're behind that.
We just have a few minutes left. I know a lot of people are going to be listening to this podcast. I don't know exactly how many, but I do know that Chris Traska will be listening to this podcast. So I just thought we would mention Chris Traska because
John Sarantaki.
John Sarantaki, but certainly Traska. Everybody.
No Paul Haley mentioned.
By the way, I have breaking news about Paul Haley. Okay, breaking news. Yeah, so the district will be improving because, and this is, I swear to God, this just came down the pike. Paul J. Haley is moving.
Oh, no.
I know.
Paul J. Haley is moving to North Carolina. Okay?
Really? You got to go with the details?
That's right. He's got a job down there, apparently, and he found a house on the beach, and he won't be in Soma anymore, so better days ahead.
So who we're going to make fun of now that
Someone's
Paul
going to make fun of Paul J.
Haley-
Haley. He's not going. I mean, he will. I don't think he'll be leaving Soma Talks anytime soon. But congratulations to Paul. His kids graduated they're out of the school, and
I know.
He's doing what so many other people have to do, which is get away from these taxes.
Oh, there's some questions that someone asked you. Someone said, do they think any of the actions of the back of the Black Pants Worship Settlement and or Fergus recommendation will affect the academics outcomes of our Black students?
In a short answer, yes. So the Fergus recommendations are the first and only codified strategy we have to address the disparate outcomes that we've been seeing for so many years, that we've been talking about, that we've been crying about, that we've been lamenting about. And yet, none of the strategies that we've put into place as of yet, because many of them are not education driven, have not worked. Listen, anti-bias training for teachers, super important. That is not going to address the achievement gap on its own, right? You've got to have a good focus on education and kind of a holistic approach, right? In terms of social, emotional, academic. And the Fergus recommendations touch on multiple of those things. And so, yes, do people want to be angry about it because it came from the Black Parents Workshop? Go ahead. But it is the only codified charge we have to address our racial achievement gaps. And for that reason alone, they're super critical. And I hope this board really does put focus on it.
Yeah, I mean, I would just quickly add that, it's an absolute, it's a yes. And by the way, the 23 recommendations, 23, right? Wasn't it around 23?
Yeah.
By Fergus, if you look at them, those are basic operational and educational best practices that would occur in any school district. Actually, the floor is the ceiling with that stuff. You look at it and say, this is what great school districts do. We're not doing it. So by doing it, will absolutely affect the achievement of Black children. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Guys, thank you so much. Anthony Mazzocchi,
Yeah.
and Madhu Pai.
Thank you so much for having
Two of the
us.
finest.
This is fun.
And we will be back with the Soma Talks podcast sometime, right, Ileana? We're not
Yeah.
exactly sure, but we'll be doing it again very... we'll be doing it again. Ileana's made me... says I can never... I'm going to be doing this podcast basically until Ileana says I'm fired. So so that may be another 10, 11 years. But anyway, good night, everybody. Thanks for listening.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of the Soma podcast. Material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. The Soma Talk podcast name in all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner and does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization.